going on, MMA fans? As you can tell, the title suggests this is a Affliction overview of everything that has gone down here in the last 24 hours. This is going to be a response video to Sean's video, the MMA Professor, just because he put the video up first and did a really good job. Real quick, one of my sponsors, I haven't had a chance to plug them, but I got to get them out there because they're one of my first sponsors. But just real quick, 8th Degree Black, they do great MMA apparel. The link's over on the description side. Make sure you check them out. As I always say, when you support MMA clothing companies, you're helping to support MMA, in its whole. Had a real rough night, so I apologize if some of this stuff doesn't come out right. But nonetheless, just a lot of stuff happened here. Affliction, of course, canceled the show. I don't want to say that I'm not surprised, but I am at the same token. Affliction had run into so many problems with the mismanagement of money, not being able to run their business model correctly. On top of that, they threw their hat into a ring that they probably should not have done, as far as Todd Beard and Tom Atencio, kind of, I don't want to say mouthing off, if you will, because they're trying to be businessmen, but, anytime you go up against Dana and the UFC, it doesn't spell, good things. The UFC, and I want, before I say this, to make this clear, the UFC was not the main attributing factor to why Affliction is not, no longer doing promotions as far as putting on cards. But the UFC is an attributing factor. Whether it's 10 or 15%, it's, I guess you could say it's left up to debate, but the UFC putting on, a fight night, a rerun of a pay-per-view, those potential viewers of Affliction are now drawn into, if it's the casual fan, is now drawn into that UFC pay-per-view because they're familiar with it. They know about Spike, they know about the UFC, there's advertisement on regular television, for the event, more so than what Affliction was doing with their advertising. So, it's sad to see, just due to the fact that what Affliction was doing was helping, more money to be paid to fighters, but they weren't using a smart business model, which has caused the demise of them as far as promoting events. Of course, they will be now a sponsor with the UFC as far as T-shirts and apparel, and a sponsor, if I remember right from reading some of the articles, which is where they will be a mainstay. They'll probably get some branding, if you will, on the Octagon. So, we'll see how all that plays out. Very, very interesting. As far as the fighters, Jagar Mousasi, Vitor Belfort, they both have talked about possibly coming to the UFC since this. I've seen some snippets from some interviews from them. Mousasi, I don't know if he's going to be willing to want to be tied down to a UFC contract. He more than likely, I think, will be going to Strikeforce. The guy that's most likely going to be in the UFC is Vitor Belfort. I think that's who you're going to see. Mousasi, I don't know. If he comes to the UFC, that'd be very, 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 very interesting. I'd love to see him at middleweight instead of 205. As far as Fedor, I know I've talked to Carson about this, I've talked to Sean about this, and several other guys here in the MMA YouTube community, but, inside sources and different things have said, they're trying to work it together, they've met, good things are happening, but, honestly, with everything that has gone down, with what the UFC wants and how they have kept everything similar across the board for everybody, as far as what you can and can't do, I don't think we're going to see Fedor in the UFC ever. And it's just something that here in the last few days, I just finally came to the conclusion and realized it's not going to happen. At least in my opinion. There's just too many restrictions, and I just don't see how it's going to work out with M1 wanting to co-promote events and, Fedor wanting to be able to have, the ability to fight in other promotions as well. It's not going to happen. It's sad, but, if Fedor would have fought the Barnett fight, this would have been, honestly, in my opinion, the last fight that he needed to fight to prove anything. That would have been, he would have beaten all of the best heavyweights. And this is something that people have to understand, that at the time, the Pride heavyweight division was the creme de la creme of the heavyweights. It was better than the UFC. It had more talent across the talent pool. Not so much now because Pride doesn't exist anymore. But Fedor had fought the best at that time, and then started fighting some more top tier competition as of late, which many brought the argument up of whether he was still on the pound for pound list based upon his inactivity. But nonetheless, I think Fedor's at that stage now that maybe one more fight, and there's really nothing more left for him. He doesn't need to prove anything else. He's the number one heavyweight without a doubt, and is probably the best heavyweight of all time. So, as far as just this whole Affliction thing, it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out and what ends up happening. Of course, if you didn't know, just real quick to tack this on as well, Tito Ortiz is back in the UFC. I'll see how that plays out. But nonetheless, those are my views on this. Let me know what you think. Leave me some comments, constructive, negative, positive. Check out my sponsors on the description side. And on that note, you guys have a great day.